Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of my podcast, Refining Rhetoric. I'm your host, Robert Bortins. In today's episode, I'll be interviewing C12 Group CEO Mike Sharrow. We'll do a brief recap at the end where I'll unpack some of the tools of learning, and we'll discuss Ukraine and use the tools of learning to help us understand what is going on better overseas. And then we'll have our Crypto with Will, where my friend and colleague Will McCreary will tell us about cryptocurrency and the history of Bitcoin. Let's jump in.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortins, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Refining Rhetoric podcast. Today, I'm happy to have Mike Sharrow, the CEO of the C12 Group, with me today to discuss BAM, B-A-A-M. In this episode, we'll cover what that acronym means and how this idea can help us live out the lives God has called us to live. Classical Conversations has been a member of the C12 Group since late 2013. I like to think of it as a challenge class for Christian CEOs and business owners. If you're not familiar with CC, Challenge is our middle school and high school program. We follow curriculum and have weekly discussions around that curriculum facilitated by a local homeschooling parent. C12 is a lot like that, but monthly, and the curriculum is related to topics that are relevant to business leaders and is facilitated by a local C12 chair. Mike grew up in Alaska, graduated from Trinity International University and the Loyola Graduate School of Business. He's married to Jackie and they have 2 daughters, Elena and Sophia. He's giving them a classical education. C12 is the largest network of Christian CEO peer advisory groups. With that, I would like to welcome Mike to the show.
Well, Robert, that person sounds cool.
Well, Mike, I think you're pretty cool. Tell me a little bit about your journey becoming head of this influential kingdom building company.
You know, when I was applying for the role in 2016, I remember telling somebody, they're like, what do you think? I was like, well, I'm probably the youngest, least educated, least qualified candidate to apply. So, you swing for it. But you look back and go like, how? I think this is my 19th job. So I've done you do all this stuff coming in college, construction and retail and all that kind of stuff. But when I started serious in business, I was working for a big company in Chicago, a big publicly traded company. And I found out a couple of things I didn't expect. I like business. I enjoyed it. I found the challenge and the problems just intriguing and satisfying. I found I was good at it and I was curious. So I had this kind of career going, but I also just loved Jesus. And I came to know Jesus as a kid. I've been really well discipled. I'd been involved in Christian education growing up, and I wanted to be all about the kingdom. And as my business career kind of scaled and my church life scaled, like I was mentoring youth and doing stuff with small groups and marriage ministry, I felt like they were competing. And I reached this point where I was like, gosh, is my career getting in my way of kingdom stuff? And I had this kind of crisis point where I realized I was letting the logo on my shirt and the job I had really kind of dictate who I was. And I thought that I needed to have a logo change to actually be who I was called to be. And I really felt like once I realized, man, does my job define my identity, or does my identity in Christ transform no matter what job I've got? And of course, Sunday school answer is yes, Jesus always. But I was like, I actually don't have any clue what that looks like. And while I'd had great churches and discipleship, I really had no idea how to bring those worlds together. They felt like competing worlds. And so I was a victim of what I'd now called, dualism or sacred secular divide. I didn't know those terms then, but I was like, I got a problem here. This is bad. So that launched me down a journey that 8 years of that company, moved to Texas, the church I was attending with my wife, actually became a pastor for a few years. And then I found myself missing business and missing the world of actually like engaging in the marketplace. I started like investing in people in my church who were in business. Wife stayed home before I said babies, launched a company, and I ended up joining a C12 group just like you are there in North Carolina, reluctantly. I never heard of it. It sounded weird to me. I didn't think I needed it. I didn't trust it. I joined and was like, oh my gosh, this is bringing all the pieces together. So I drank the Kool-Aid. About a year and a half later, I actually left my role at the church and shut down my business and became a chair. A few years later, became a regional leader of chairs. And then almost 6 years ago, got a chance to be the 3rd leader of the national, now global organization. So I would have never guessed. I had lots of 5 and 10-year career plans. This was never on the map.
Yeah. Well, I love that because the Sunday school answer, growing up, you hear Colossians 3:23, do everything unto the Lord and not to men, but no one explains how you do that.
Exactly.
So you said you're the C12 is the largest network of Christian CEO peer advisory groups. So tell our audience a little bit more about what that means.
So that means we orchestrate and help develop these monthly meetings, like you said before, in cities all around the US, around the world now, South America and Asia primarily, where business owners who are Christians and all in growth stage businesses, we don't do startups, we're not an accelerator, but otherwise it's unrelated. So education company, tech company, health company, we're kind of agnostic to the product you do. Meet once a month to go, gosh, how do we navigate being leaders? How do we run a business? And then what is the eternal perspective? How would that change our business beyond just not doing bad stuff? When I moved to Texas, which is my first time living in a Bible Belt state, quote unquote, everyone here is Christian. Most people just don't believe in Jesus or the Bible. So it's kind of like weird deal where I was like, I don't think those words mean what you think they mean. And when I'd ask people like, oh, so you're a Christian. So what does that mean in business? They'd be like, well, I don't lie. I don't steal. I don't cheat. I pay people on time. I was like, that just means you don't go to jail.
Yeah.
Makes you a decent human being, kind of. So we create these intense meetings once a month where people join. They stay for like 10, 20 years. It becomes like your external board of advisors. You learn together, you challenge each other, you get a chance to dive into those businesses and really hold each other accountable to what I'd call both integrated discipleship and integrated stewardship, realizing that God cares about what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. And it just kind of does the whole enchilada. So we get to serve leaders all around the world doing that, who employ almost 1 million people right now in their businesses, and helping them think about like, man, that's a lot of responsibility. What's the impact do you get to have, and how do you do that? So yeah, they're professional groups and they are game changers. I'm a member of a forum right now. I pay dues, drive to Austin, Texas. I'm a member of a forum. And one of the guys is a publicly traded CEO, tech space. He'll fly back from his Wall Street investors meeting on Wednesday night to make our group on Thursday. We meet for 7 hours and hang around, get dinner afterwards half the time. And then he'll fly back to San Francisco the next day for a different investor meeting. And I'm like, you don't do that if it's just a Bible study or a chit chat group. Like they're pretty serious.
100%. I am a C12 evangelist. I tell every business owner that I know that they need to get into a C12 group. And of course, there's secular counterparts, but they're focused on the bottom line or driving revenue and not focused on really stewarding souls that the Lord's put in front of you. Mm-hmm. And it's been really fun to see. You weren't the CEO when I joined C12, and you've done a lot of great things that I've really enjoyed. And one of those is this idea of what I say, BAM, because it's just so influential. But it's taken off of the idea of SaaS. For those who don't know, SaaS, it stands for software as a service. So you might think of like Spotify or Netflix as a software as a service, typically used in B2B or business to business context. And I'm guessing that's where you kind of came up with this idea of BAM. Yep. So what is BAM?
What is that fun word to say? Exactly. So what I think most Christians go on a journey of at some level, or at least I'm going to say I did. So I don't think I'm the only one, is you go from this place like I was wrestling, where I was this great Christian, or trying to be a good Christian at least, and this business person. And I've got those two worlds, and I'm trying to be good at both. And it was not like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde at work, but I was ministry mode Jesus guy, and then I was decent person at business, and they're kind of separate. And then some people bring them close together, where you got business and ministry, or business and mission, where maybe your business or your career funds all sorts of, orphanages and Bible translation. And everyone knows like, I do this job or I run this business so I can fund that great work. And that's cool. There's some people who do all sorts of, Tom Shoes does that, right? But we want to go, it's not business one way and ministry. It's business as a ministry, really trying to blend 2 points. One, if you're a follower of Jesus and you're running a business or leading a department, then you never stop being a disciple of Jesus. Like you're not like a disciple from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. and then on the weekends. You're a disciple of Jesus 24/7. So ministry should be a question you're always asking in any business, even if it's a engineering company or a healthcare company. Is like, what does ministry, since I'm here, look like? And it's not just business enabling me to go do evangelism or philanthropy. It's actually going, well, how would I treat accounting as ministry? How would I do sales as ministry? How would I actually let the gospel and a biblical worldview redeem every part of the business? And realize that God is glorified and people are blessed when not just I write a big check or hand out Bibles. Those are cool things. But man, if I'm doing that, but in the back office, abusive to people, have bad relationships with customers, not stewarding my finances well, like ministry is actually how you do everything in business as a follower of Jesus. So it's trying to fuse these ideas that business is a ministry. The only question is it a good one? Just like I think Charles Spurgeon said, famous British pastor, he said, every Christian is either a missionary or an imposter. So like, those are options. And the question is just, are you good at it?
Yeah. And so, did an angel come down and tell you about this, or, is there Bible verses that back this idea up? Because so many people view life, I'm a Christian when I'm at church, or, when I'm doing Christian things, but then the rest of my life is just trying to do, like you said, not do bad.
Yeah. Where this come in scripture, so I have to admit, I was so embarrassed when I realized how biblical this idea is and how old this idea is, because when I got involved in C12, I kind of was like, oh, there's this whole new world and there's all this cool stuff. And I started reading stories of people doing stuff in America the last century. I'm like, wow, R.G. Letourneau. And, there's some really cool people, the Green family, Hobby Lobby. And I was like, this is cool. The guy who founded C12 is this amazing guy in his 80s named Buck Jacobs. And he's like, well, Mike, it's not like it's new. It's just new to you. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, well, go look at the Bible. And so if you go back and suddenly take the Bible stories from colored books you and I may have read as a kid away and just read them in context, you'd be like, wait a minute, Abraham led a really big business. He had hundreds of employees and was wildly wealthy. And the way he ran his enterprise actually caused even pagans to be like, hey, stay here. You're good for our economy. Like, yeah, we don't like your God, but we really like your business and it's good for us. I never really thought about Abraham as a businessman. Or that meant Jacob and Isaac. That was a family business that went multiple generations. And then you start going to the New Testament, you realize, gosh, all the disciples were business people. They had day jobs before. They weren't priests. Jesus did most of his teachings, not on Saturday, the Sabbath in synagogue, but on Tuesdays in the marketplace. I suddenly realized that this idea of business as a ministry is actually biblically and historically normal. We're actually in the weird time where it seems strange. It's actually the ancient idea. I just grew up in 21st century America where we're used to the secularism and we've kind of accepted Christianity's in a box here. And then you just play the world's way over here. So yeah, there's tons of verses that, like you said, Colossians 3:23, we know we're supposed to do all things unto Christ. What does that mean? We don't really know. So we just nod our heads and follow the normal playbook. We send our kids to secular schools and we learn business from the secular playbooks and are like, well, tithe and, go on mission trips every once in a while and don't do bad. But if you go back and read all these characters, you suddenly realize most of the people God used to change the world historically have been dudes like you and me. And it's not strange. It's actually stranger for him to say, leave all that and just become a nonprofit or just become this. Like those have a role in place. But yeah, it was actually, I felt like it's like Alice in Wonderland. You go down a rabbit hole and you're like, oh my gosh, there's this whole world. I missed this. It's been all over the Bible. I didn't know it.
Yeah, it's amazing when you kind of change your view or look at things more holistically, what opens up to you. And I knew, like I said, growing up, that I was supposed to live a life a certain way. And, a lot of it was don't do this, act this way, make sure that people are proud of you and how you behave in public. And that type of Christianity. And of course, that's not what my parents were trying to do, but that's just kind of the world around you. And of course, we're fallen, sinful people and prone to go that direction. So you mentioned like this doesn't just apply to nonprofits. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I don't think God really cares how you pay taxes. I'm a big fan of not paying taxes or paying as little taxes as you have to. But I don't think the IRS classification of your business changes the way God views you. And I think, frankly, you and I could probably spend a whole episode talking about what's wrong with society today and culture wars. And there's a lot we could be, woe is me. I don't like where things are going. So put that aside. I actually think this is a golden moment for the very work you and I do, because while, yes, there's a total depravity of Christian values and heritage and truth, and people are distrusting institutions of the church oftentimes, and people are growing up with horrible home environments and parenting. Okay, that's our context. We got the gospel, and what they are doing, they're going to work and they're chasing success. And interestingly enough, in the 21st century, what are people crying for? They're crying for meaning and dignity and love and security and justice and all these things. Now they mean perverted things sometimes by those, or they have shallow expectations of them, but they're crying out for things that only the gospel actually satisfies. And in work, one of the things that just blew me away is that if you do ministry in a nonprofit or a church setting, and I've done those, and I've started nonprofits and done stuff in other countries, you generally are transacting with people in a very limited window. Maybe someone comes to church for an hour or an hour and a half, or you got them in a class and you got to kind of like close the deal. It's sales. In business, man, you're together 40, 50 hours a week. You're doing stuff in and out with customers, with vendors. You get to do iterative, ongoing ministry. And generally, people who come to church are already looking for God. You and I get to do business in places where people may not know they are. And we get to reach people that would otherwise never go to a church. And so I think this business is ministry. I think actually many nonprofits, frankly, we serve some amazing nonprofits that also join C12. Just because you've got a Christian mission statement and your financial statements aren't about profit doesn't mean you're doing business as a ministry either. If you're not managing people well and product well and finance well, that could be a really bad business as a ministry example. And so I think we find ourselves saying we are just as much, I believe that you, Robert Bortins, or anybody running a healthcare company, a construction company is just as accountable before God for what they did with the gospel as someone running a homeless shelter, a Christian school, or a church. And I think God cares about how well we do both of those things. So we're all kind of in the same boat.
Yeah. And I love how you bring up just where people are. Jesus went to the people in the New Testament, go into the marketplace. Many Americans or even people around the world, they'll never walk into a church. But they will 100% do business with somebody because you got to feed yourself. You got to be able to provide for your family. And just that potential reach is amazing. And one of the things I love about C12 is every year you guys kind of ask us, how many people do you know in your business that were saved, whether it's customers or employees? And that's always so exciting. So how many people are you aware of in C12 that have been saved through their interaction with C12 companies?
Oh, this is what's going to blow you away. When I tell people, we talk about if you go to business school and you talk about how do you measure the success of a business, there's different models. And one of the things we'll talk about is different value adds. So people talk about economic value add. What's the EBITDA? What's the profitability? What's the value of your business? Did you grow it? And that matters. We measure those things too. And then some people are like, no, it's about people. So what's the team value add? What's the human impact? And we measure that too. That matters. But we introduce this new term, spiritual value add, essentially what's the eternal fruitfulness this business is creating? And people are like, well, how do you measure that? You can't measure all of it, but you can measure some things, and some things we see. Do you know how many people the average church in America sees come to Christ in a year, Robert?
I think it's astonishing low, maybe 2 or 3 people. I don't know the exact number.
It's about 1.7.
Wow.
That's the average church in America will see 1.7 people come to faith in Jesus. Now, you may go to a cool church that sees way more than that. Before that means there's a bunch of churches that will see 0 in a year. Mm-hmm. Okay, so 1.7 is the average number of salvations per year per church in America. The average C12 company sees anywhere from 4 to 7. And in our mature markets, and by that I mean they've been doing this for a long time and businesses ministry is just like a thing, the average is 9 to 10 salvations per company per year. I just this morning, right before this podcast, was talking to a CEO in Tennessee running a highway construction company. And these are some roughneck folks building roads, building bridges. And he'd been a Christian, multi-generational family, generous. He'd never thought about his business as ministry. Joined C12, second month, they started putting some things in. He hired Corporate Chaplains of America. He started putting some things in the workplace culture he never thought of. He's now seen 160 of his employees come to Christ. And he starts bawling. He's like, I would have never even imagined that my roadway construction company would see 160 people come to Christ. So wow. We see about 6,000 to 10,000 people a year in American businesses coming to Christ for the first time, separate from thousands, tens of thousands being discipled, connected to local churches. And I like to say we're kind of turning the lights on these for-profit missional enterprises that just happen to be businesses.
You can build roads for Jesus.
You can do anything for Jesus. I have seen some crazy businesses just have crazy impact, and it totally changes the way you view industries and sectors and spaces. You're in the education space, so your families are dealing with young people. Now you get to deal with the kind of the good young families. So a family who's going to come to you is probably a family that really cares and is trying to do good values. As a lot of employers are not getting those kids, there's more of the other kids. There's a guy in Dallas, him and his family run some restaurants, and they were just lamenting the work ethic of the 17 to 22-year-olds who are coming into work at the restaurants and they're not showing up on time, and attitude and technology and blah, 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 blah. And someone challenged and said, well, what if okay, that's it. The world's got broken kids coming to bed. What are you doing to change that? Like, how are you teaching them values, teaching them heritage? How could you change the trajectory of their lives? What if God's given you a revolving door of kids who've never been parented and you get to show the gospel to them? They now see 5 people a week come to Christ in the restaurants.
Wow.
5 people a week. Like, again, that's more in 1 week than most churches have in a year. And it's just totally changed their whole business.
Mm. Yeah, you don't have to, have a MDiv or go to college to become a minister or anything like that to be ordained by God, right? He told us to go out into all the world and create disciples. And all the world doesn't necessarily mean like every nook and cranny, but really, every aspect of the world, whether it's business or education or, athletics, wherever God plants us, we have an opportunity to bloom. And I always like to say that, whether you're a garbage man or middle manager or CEO or president, the Bible makes it very clear to me that he's going to hold you accountable for whatever your lot in life was. And if you are giving a lot of blessings, in my mind, you're going to be expected to have a lot of fruit. And, maybe if life wasn't always fair to you, maybe, that expectation isn't as high if you're, in the slums of India as far as what you're going to do. But God is still going to hold you accountable for the resources he gave you and the people he put in front of you as a Christian when you stand in front of the Bema seat. And I think we can all live out this business as a ministry lifestyle. So if you're not a business owner, you don't run a department, maybe you don't even work for a company, maybe you're a stay-at-home mom, maybe you have a small business. How does this idea of BAM apply to you?
So if there's something I wish I could broadcast to every Christian, like in subliminal messaging, it would be to I feel like the Church of Christ is in somewhat suspended animation with millions of people essentially waiting to be commissioned or put in the game or told like you are called. I mean, tons of people who are like, I just have never got called. So I'm just doing business or I'm just doing this. And I'd say if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, Jesus never called part-time disciples or called people and said, now go sit on a bench. I'll call you when I need you. He commissioned everyone. So if you're a follower of Jesus, you're a disciple-making disciple, or you're called to be. You're a minister of the gospel, you're called to be. And he cares about what you do and how you do it and why you do it. So whether you're in the job you like or just a job you got to do to pay the bills, I've done plenty of those, then realizing that every day is a day you live with Jesus. If you go back and look at the Old Testament kings were judged not just for whether or not they were God-fearing or not, but whether or not they led and created kingdoms that were God-honoring. So sometimes you'd have a king where like, he didn't do the bad things his dad did, but he also didn't tear down the high places. Idolatry flourished all around him and he didn't do anything about it. And so basically it's complicit. So I think we're all called to be champions of confronting wickedness and injustice, championing truth and goodness, and then looking at every job we have, business we have, and saying, okay, if God is my boss, what would best practice to him be? And if we're all called to present the gospel, how do we begin seeing the brokenness and the annoyance of that space and go, how do I be light in that? How do I be salt to that? Like you said, whether you're without any power or authority, you're an entry-level role in a business, you get to decide how, as for me and my house, this is how I'm going to be. And how do I help be a champion of that? And maybe like Daniel or Joseph or Nehemiah, God will elevate you even within a pagan environment where you're not in control, but you have influence. But the cool part is it also changed. I feel like it changes the discipleship journey, because I frankly used to think I was a way better Christian than I actually was, because I was a good Christian on Sunday and I could tell the word, I could sing, I could answer the Bible trivia questions. I had right doctrine up in my head. But then I began realizing you're actually only as mature as a Christian based on how you live on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Like at 3:00 on Thursday, when you're dealing with difficult people and problems and broken products, like that's where your actual theology is going to ooze out. And I was like, man, I'm not actually a great Christian. But it also then kind of makes each day a gymnasium of like a dojo of how do I work out my faith? And Jesus, I want to go and figure out how to honor you in this job. And so business as ministry, if I was to put it another way, I'd say it can be vocation as ministry, career as ministry. It's really about life as mission. And one of the things I hope like you get to influence, how many thousands of kids are in your education program?
Well over 100,000.
I mean, that's unbelievable. So 100,000 young people, future leaders of America and around the world. When I go and speak at traditional high school graduation seminars or ceremonies, one of the things I hate is I think even at a young age, we're allowing kids to feel like if you didn't get a call, a FedEx envelope from heaven saying, go to Africa, then, oh, well, just don't do bad things, go off and do a career because you weren't one of the special ones. But every kid should leave high school with an understanding, like, I am called by God to be a kingdom ambassador. I may be an engineer, I may be a nurse, I may be whatever, but live it out and let that be redemptively transformative to whatever you're doing.
That's awesome. Where can people learn about the C12 Group?
We have a really secretive website called joinc12.com. joinc12.com. You can lurk on YouTube and find videos about people who are actually living this out, sharing wins and losses. You can find ebooks and articles. You can find out where we're at. There's stuff kind of in all the different social media channels that we're trying to put out examples. Because I think you mentioned earlier, you can sometimes feel like you're alone in this or like no one else is doing this. There's a point where Elijah was running from Queen Jezebel and he's like kind of depressed. And he's like, God, I'm the only one. And I call it like his Skywalker moment. He's like, I'm the only one. If I die, then all's lost. And God meets him in that moment of distress and kind of does like a pat on the head is how I read it. It's like, you're not Luke Skywalker. You're not the only hope. Just, there's 7,000 other people who are also following me at that point. Elijah just had a skewed view of reality. And one of the things I think is so encouraging is, man, we serve 3,200 people. We don't serve all the people but that's 3,000 CEOs and leaders of businesses, let alone vice presidents and directors and managers all around. And so I think if we can help redeem the normalness of living this way, and it can change our lives, change our families, and then it changes worlds. And so, yeah, check us out. A lot of people, we may not be able to serve you. Maybe you're in North Dakota or someplace we're not, but I hopefully we put enough resources out that can help you be inspired and equipped to live out BAM in whatever context you're in.
That's awesome. And I just encourage everyone to go to their YouTube page. I love watching the videos. They're like 3 to 5 minutes and they're about different business topics typically and really how to live out ministry. But they're just so inspirational and such an encouragement that even if you're just running a small homeschool co-op and meeting once a week with some families, that you can learn a few things about living out BAM in that stage of life. So thank you, Mike, for sharing your thoughts today about the Christian walk and why all of us, no matter what our role is, can and should remember that we are here on earth, that we are about our Father's business, and that business is ministry.
Amen. Thank you, Robert.
I want you to know about Schoolhouse Rocked, the Homeschool Revolution. It is a feature-length documentary that will break down common misconceptions about homeschooling, empower new families to homeschool, and equip those already homeschooling to do it with excellence. The film follows host Yvette Hampton as she travels the country with her family, meeting other homeschoolers and educational experts, including yours truly, to learn the secrets of successfully homeschooling and tell the story of the millions of people who have been impacted by the homeschool revolution. To find out more, visit classicalconversations.com/rocked today. I just enjoy speaking with Mike so much. And as always, we will do our classical tool recap, and we'll start with the 5 core habits and expressing. I just have so much love for C12, and it's been so helpful to me personally and leading classical conversations, and really has a positive impact on our customers and our team members. So that was one of the tools I used in the episode today. In the 5 common topics, we talk about circumstance. And Mike described what brought him to C12 and his path and how he felt dissatisfied with the status quo where he was forced to separate business and ministry. And finally, the 5 canons of rhetoric and invention. And really, this is something that I used beforehand, just really curating questions for this interview with Mike, because I really wanted to get his perspective on the world and our relationship with Jesus and what Jesus has called us to do, because I know that it doesn't just apply as business as ministry, but that our entire life can walk this path that Mike gave us a vision for today. So that's how I used invention in today's podcast. Let's talk about current events. For current events today, we're going to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine and practice the 15 tools of learning, those 5 core habits, the 5 common topics of dialectic, and the 5 canons of rhetoric. It's important to know that none of these are just individual standalone. they're all integrated. And so sometimes something could be like, okay, we're going to call this naming. But really it could be considered something else altogether. So there's not always a clear cut what category this should fall under. So with the 5 core habits and talking about naming today, knowing the appropriate word. And to me, a lot of this is about definition. So one of the things that we might want to say is, where are the Russian borders? And really pull out a map and look at it. Maybe where is the USSR borders prior to the falling of the wall? Ukraine, what's the history of this country? Where are its borders? And Russia leaders have talked about NATO. So what is NATO? Why was it formed? When was it formed? And so these are all examples of naming and possibly even attending the 5 core habits of grammar that we would want to look at to get a better understanding of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Next, the 5 common topics of dialectic. Comparison. So Ukrainian President Zelensky recently said, "I need ammunition, not a ride," after President Biden asked if he wanted a lift out of the Capitol. So you could compare his actions and statements to that of the Afghanistan President Ashraf Ghani as he departed before the Taliban invaded. You'd also want to say, what did the Taliban's invasion, how did that go? And how does that going compared to the Russian invasion? And then from a relationship standpoint, what might this say about those 2 countries and their culture or their citizens when we compare those 2 things? So we have the opportunity to use comparison and relationship to another recent conflict to help us get insight into the Russian and Ukrainian war. Finally, the 5 canons of rhetoric. Here we might practice memory. What happened in Ukraine in 2014? What has Putin done historically in his expansion of Russia? And you can see that naming and defining our terms earlier about where Russia is would be important in answering that final question. So those are some of the tools of learning and how we might use them to understand current events and specifically the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I would like to say that this is being recorded on February 28th, 2022, and it is going to be released in March. And so a lot can happen between now and the time you have listening. But these tools are all things that we can use to help us understand current events, no matter what they are. Next, I'm super excited after this brief break to have Crypto with Will. And he's going to be talking about the history of Bitcoin and why it's so important. So stay tuned for the final segment. Are you looking for the perfect books to read aloud with the whole family? Senators of Rome and Exploring the Heavens with Uncle Paul are 2 of the newest releases in the Copper Lodge Library series and have been designed to accompany Foundation Cycle 2 content. If you love learning about science, history, and how they work together in God's greater plan, these books are for you. Find them in the Classical Conversations bookstore.
Welcome back to 5 Minutes of Crypto with Will. I'm really excited about this topic today. We will be examining the characteristics of currency. When it comes to crypto, this is a great topic to examine because maybe not at first glance, but anyone who starts investing and studying crypto more in depth will realize that there's, of course, no physical Bitcoin or Ethereum token, nothing physical you can hold in your hand. These are digital products, digital quote unquote tokens. Now, for some folks, I could see them saying, if I can't grab it, if I can't touch it, hold it, I'm out. And to each their own, but that doesn't mean there isn't value there. Can you grab the wind? Can you hold a cellular transmission in your hand? Cryptos, when they're boiled down, they're very rare and valuable digital algorithms and protocols. But I will say, the argument about whether or not crypto should be a currency is very valid and legitimate. So I grabbed an AP economics textbook and did a ton of research online. Generally, the following 6 characteristics are used to teach students what currency is. This is very good. I actually had to sit back, ponder, and appreciate these concepts, and it's already changed the way I view money a bit. Now, we don't have a ton of time, so let's start flying through this. Characteristics of money or currency. Currency has to be durable, has to be portable, has to be divisible, uniform, a limited supply, and acceptable. There has to be acceptability there, right? Needs to be recognized abroad. Now, to give this some context, let's compare gold, a commodity, the US dollar, and crypto. Let's compare them against these characteristics, okay? And take this with a grain of salt. This is my opinion in real time, but I'm going to rank these on a 1 to 10 scale, okay? So the durability of gold is fantastic, right? That's amazing. That's a 10 for 10. The dollar, according to the Federal Reserve, a $50 bill lasts up to 12 years. So that's durable. They have a system to replace it. That's a 9 out of 10. Crypto, as long as the internet is in place, crypto is a 10 for 10. Portability of gold is tough. Gold has weight. It's heavy compared against the dollar, which is light and easily portable. So gold, we're going to do a 5 out of 10. The dollar, 10 for 10. Crypto's even better. You could put $1 billion on a hard drive, put that in your pocket. It's very portable. That's also a 10 for 10. Divisibility. This is a tough one for gold. It's measured in ounces, rarity, purity. Kind of divide by gold bars, but it's tough. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Divisibility for the dollar is tremendous. 100 pennies in a dollar. Our system's set up there. For Bitcoin, blows divisibility out of the water. There are a million Satoshis in one Bitcoin. You can divide it so many different ways. It's remarkable. Uniformity. Gold comes in different sizes and shapes. You could have a gold lamp, a gold coin, gold earrings, gold car. You know, it's so many different forms, which is crazy. We're going to give that a 4 out of 10. The dollar, on the other hand, or a quarter is the same size as the next one. 10 out of 10. Bitcoin, even better. Protocols that are the same. And guess what? They're small, easily portable. The uniformity there is remarkable. Limited supply. For gold, we're always adding to the supply. Not a bad thing in that case. That's a 7 out of 10. Bitcoin, 10 out of 10. Limited supply, 21 million coins. There will never be more, never be less than that. The dollar, man, this is the dollar's weakest area. Acceptability. Gold accepted everywhere. 10 for 10. Very trustworthy source there. The dollar pretty much accepted everywhere. It's reserve currency for many nations. Bitcoin, this is a 3 out of 10 for Bitcoin. The technological infrastructure is not there yet, but it is growing rapidly. I love these. Durability, portability, divisibility, uniformity, limited supply, acceptability, great indicators of what make up a strong currency. Apart from hopefully giving you another lens by which to measure and evaluate currency, I hope you found this fascinating today. Please join us next time on 5 Minutes of Crypto with Will, and we will examine smart contracts, what they are, and use cases. God bless.
If you enjoyed today's episode where we practice the 15 tools of learning through our conversation with Mike Sharrow, looking at current events, and getting up to speed with Crypto with Will, be sure to share it with a friend and be sure to tune in next time. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortins. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.